Ladies and gents, PepperBelly here, and welcome to some Ground Branch multiplayer. Finally, right? It's been a very long time I've been showing off this game, occasionally, whenever a significant update would come out, something I can actually talk about, and I've never really actually got to sit down and truly try out playing a multiplayer game. I had an experience a while back. I tried to record, but it was literally like 3, 4, 5 minutes of multiplayer, and immediately afterwards the server crashed and we were not able to play it, so it was kind of unfortunate. Ever since then, the servers were somewhat stable, but obviously not stable enough, and not a lot of people are obviously in the game right now because it's not even in early access yet. It's really early alpha, and the only way you were able to purchase it was buying it on their website. And even then, you're no longer able to purchase it on their website anymore until early access comes out. Everyone else that has the Operator Edition has access to the game, and they can try it out. Anyway, point is, I managed to play it, and I was actually doing some 1v1 here with a fellow named Missverstanden, which I have come to learn means misunderstood, or some meaning like that in German. He actually hosts this server in Germany, I believe. So I had a pretty high ping, well, actually it wasn't even that bad, surprisingly. Usually pings to Europe can be pretty significant for me, depending, even though I'm like on the east coast of Canada. For me, it was like, the ping was telling me I had 121, so it wasn't too bad. Hit registration was mostly spot on, although of course the net code can be finicky at times where you'll shoot someone and, you know, the bullets just don't register. Like, you clearly know you should have killed the guy, but then you die anyway, and anyway, it happens. And then later on in the night, it's kind of funny, I was about to leave actually, because I was planning on leaving. I was like, okay, you know, we played for about a solid hour, and now I gotta go. I got things to do. And then it was like, he's like, hold on a second. He's like, wait a minute. Someone else might be joining. And with the idea of having more people in the game to play, it kind of got me excited. So I was like, you know what, screw it. I'm gonna like just throw everything out the window, just drop everything, and I'll wait and see what happens. So then 2 more people ended up joining, and we had some 2v2 games later on, which I'll probably upload just a gameplay of that as another video separately, because it's quite long, guys. I recorded like an hour 34 non-stop of gameplay of just this, and it's mostly repetitive. It's very much the same, but it's really fun. And obviously, if you're looking at the map here, you can tell that it's obviously not a real map. This is not a map that's going to be in the game. This is for testing purposes. It's strictly a testing map. And it's shaped and designed a lot like a speedball field, if any of you guys are familiar with paintball, which is freaking awesome, because playing it, it just reminded me a ton of playing paintball back in my days, going to tournaments and stuff and playing on the fields. It looks near identical to an actual paintball field, so it's a hell of a lot of fun to be able to kind of realistically apply what I'm doing in the game in a similar manner that I would do it in real life from personal experience with both real and firearms and paintball guns. So it's like, I was able to really distinguish the realism put in the game just by playing on this map. And I can tell you straight up, it is near spot on, and it is insanely fun. I was pleasantly surprised with how freaking fun this game is to play and how it actually feels. It has a very realistic look to it and a very realistic feel to it, and that's probably the biggest distinguishing factor for this game. It's easily one of the best feeling games I have played that replicates weapon movement, weapon reaction, player movement. It replicates in a way that's almost unmatched by any other game I've ever played. Plus having low ready posture, bringing the weapon up, being able to point shoot effectively, all this kind of stuff. It really makes this game tremendously good. And even though what I'm playing here is incredibly limited, and the game still needs a ton of work, there's no denying that. There's still a lot of bugs. Animations can still use some work, you know, like you can jump and it's just like a static animation. You can still strafe back and forth really quickly, although it's not exactly effective because of how much the weapon sways. So don't think you're going to be running around, strafing back and forth, shooting with 100% accuracy all the time, because you will not. The weapon moves a lot in a realistic manner you would expect, given the speed you are traversing at, which is really good. And one thing I've noticed, which a lot of people also notice, is that when you're crouching and you're moving, you are less stable. The weapon actually bobs and moves significantly more when you're crouch walking compared to when you're standing up and moving around. And some people are kind of like, yeah, that's undoubtedly realistic, right? Or is there some level of realism to that? Because a lot of games out there typically try to make it so that the lower profile you are, the more stable you are. So if you're standing up, you have the least stability. If you're crouching, you have more stability. If you're prone, you have the most stability. And most games will also include movement into that category. So it'll be like, if you're crouching and you're moving, you're more stable. If you're standing and you're moving, you're less stable. If you're prone and you're moving, well, you can't really shoot when you're prone while moving. That doesn't make any sense unless you're Rainbow Six Siege. Anyway, point is, in this game, it has a realistic replication where you cannot shoot. You're not as stable when you're crouching. Because believe it or not, when you're actually hunkering down and crouching like that, when you're walking, your body is contorted in a way that makes it less stable. It's just like, as you're walking like that, you aren't a stable firing platform like when you're standing. When you're standing, it feels natural. And in fact, I remember a lot of times in my military career, the number one thing I would try to do is engage while standing. Because having to like crawl around on the ground, even playing paintball. Paintball is a perfect example, especially considering the map design here. If you're going along the snake on the side of the field, or you're using low cover, which is basically, they're called snakes, like those really long, inflatable, really low on one side of the map. In this map, it's replicated by sandbags. So if you're moving along that, you have to get down really low and crawl. And it's very hard in real life to like actually try to orient yourself in a way to be able to shoot back effectively while moving, because you can't really do it. And this game replicates it in a very realistic way. If you're moving too quickly, the weapon just moves too much. It's very hard. It's actually a struggle. You're fighting, trying to maintain that weapon's orientation. And that's actually exactly what it's like in real life. You're trying to keep that weapon straight. And it's a lot harder than people tend to think. A lot of games out there make it seem like, you know, let's talk about Rainbow Six Siege, right? That game makes it seem like you can aim down your sights and run around with zero consequence, when in reality, that's just not how it is. No matter how effective of an operator you are, the weapon will respond to movement. It's just the way it is. Unless you are a machine that is gyro-stabilized like an M1 tank, the weapon is going to move. There's nothing you can do about that. I mean, also you can get better at holding and positioning and moving your body properly in a way that can alleviate the way or how much the weapon will actually move. But it's a consequence of movement. It's the consequence of the dynamics of the human body. You cannot 100% stabilize that weapon, which is why moving as slow as possible or being stationary is the only real way to stabilize that weapon, to be a stable firing platform. And this game illustrates that in a way that is commendable. And obviously, like I said, there's still a ton of work that needs to be done to further polish the overall game experience, making it better and obviously work as intended with no glitches, perfect fluidity, all that stuff. Now, like I said in most of my ground branch videos, I always talk about how perfect the movement and shooting is, right? You got the low ready posture, the way you can move around and manipulate the weapon. It's exactly what I expect in a next generation type of tactical shooter, right? Something that's going to be focusing on realism and trying to accurately replicate real life. You need to implement mechanics that kind of do exactly that, right? That can best emulate reality. And Ground Branch is easily the top tier game I have ever played that has done it right. It made it feel natural and easy and intuitive. And comparing it to a game like Arma 3, like, it just makes me think, if Arma 3 had the exact same movement controls, the exact same setup as Ground Branch, it would be an incredible game. It's already a good game as it is, but again, it's the movement and the way things function are clunky, right? It's not quite there. If it had exactly what Ground Branch had right now, it'd be like, hands down, game of the year. Best game of the year all years, right? It'd just be like the best game ever. But unfortunately, it's not. It's a clunky experience. The controls are just not exactly the best. It could do things better. And Ground Branch easily, as I've said many, many times in the past, has done it the best. And this is a game I think others should strive to model theirs after. I think if Squad, implemented this exact movement and shooting mechanics into their game, it would be absolutely perfect, right? The game already is phenomenal as it is. If they literally copy-pasted what Ground Branch has going on here, it would solidify that game being easily one of the best shooters ever made. Like, easily would solidify that title. And Ground Branch is a testament to what true tactical shooter fans want from a tactical shooter. If you guys don't know or aren't aware of how the developers are going about the process of balancing and creating and designing the overall game, is based on the system they call NORG. And that stands for Natural Order of Realistic Gameplay. So instead of having any artificial means of balancing out certain characteristics of the game, instead, they let the natural world dictate what is realistic and how to balance it. So example, if you're going to be having an M4 carbine, right? You're going to be like, okay, instead of artificially balancing this weapon for some nonsensical reason like most traditional arcade shooters do because they have an overabundance of weapons, they're going to let the real world dictate how that weapon functions. So they're going to input realistic mechanics. How far does the ballistics of an M4 actually travel? How does it actually react with obstacles? How does it penetrate through certain pieces of cover? How's the recoil on it? How does it function? What are the bolt reaction? How is the actual mechanical functions of the weapon determine how effective it is in combat and stuff like that? All those things culminate to make the weapon behave in a very realistic way, exactly as you would expect. And that goes for everything, right? Fragmentation grenades. Most grenades in the real world, or well, in the games, let's talk about games first. Most grenades in games have a radius, a blast radius. If the grenade lands a certain distance from you, when it explodes, depending on how close you are from the actual blast, dictates how much damage you receive. So if you have a full health bar, if you're like 15 meters away, you'll take the least damage. If you're a little bit closer, let's say you're 10 meters away, you'll take a little bit more damage, and so on and so forth until like you're on top of it and it's almost a guaranteed instant kill. That's not really how grenades work in the real world. Grenades blow up with shrapnel flying in all directions, and they fly up in an upwards cone. Usually. Which is why when a grenade lands in a room or lands near you, try to lay on the ground, because there's a small chance that you may actually avoid all the shrapnel altogether. It'll fly right over top of your body. Not always, right? You still want to obviously find real hard cover to get behind. But it's shrapnel that is what kills you. It's not the blast. It's not like a concussive effect that kills you. It can cause internal hemorrhaging and bleeding and stuff, but more often than not, it's the shrapnel that kills you. And they want to have realistic damage modifiers. So if a grenade goes off near you, where are the shrapnel wounds? Where have they actually embedded themselves in your body? Which part of your uniform or the armor you're wearing blocked off some of that shrapnel? What was the trauma to the area that was actually affected? All these things are going to be accounted for in this game when it's actually completed, which is like insane to me. Like I remember that was one of the biggest selling points to me when I remember hearing about this game back in 2008. It was like, that's incredible, right? I'm sitting there thinking like that is easily the best design decision I have ever seen a game that wants to replicate reality ever do. Like it tries to mimic that exact realistic thing. It's the same idea with claymores, right? Claymores, you freaking trip them and they just explode. Again, if you're within a certain radius, you're dead. Well, that's not exactly how it works. Claymores are actually tiny ball bearings locked inside the front of this claymore. And when it blows up, it sends these ball bearings and a very concentrated cone of fire in one particular direction so that everything in front of it just gets hit with all these ball bearings. It's like, think of it like 1,000 bullets just flying at you all at once in a concentrated direction. That's essentially what a claymore does. And again, if you can avoid those actual physical fragments, you'd be fine. And that's what they're trying to dictate and show within this game. Realistic ballistic behaviors, proper mathematics and physics that determine exactly how the world plays out realistically, like how the real world works in the natural order. And to me, that's the best way you can ever balance a game. No artificial BS. It's just, hey, this is how it is in real life. And we're going to replicate that as accurately as possible given the technology we have to develop this game. And that's, again, the major reason why I got on board for Ground Branch is because of that. The design philosophy behind the game. And I really want to see it made. Obviously, you guys all know that. I'm pretty sure many of you want to see it made as well. And I can tell you from what I've played, as I've said multiple times throughout this video, it's shaping up fairly well. It's shaping up nicely. Again, it has bugs. It needs to be fully fleshed out. It's got a lot of work ahead of it, but it's already starting to shape up into a game that I can tell you from what I've experienced is going to be the best tactical shooter ever released on the history of this fucking planet. Alright, like, it's going to set the bar so high. Like, if it's delivered in its full potential that we expect it to be, what the developers have in mind, it is going to be the best tactical shooter. Like, it's going to set the bar for everyone else to follow. And it's going to make games like Rainbow Six Siege look like complete and utter shit in comparison. So everybody who loves true tactical shooters, all of you guys who came from Rainbow Six, the original, you know, Rogue Spear, Raven Shield, and SWAT 3 and 4, and maybe the old Operation Flashpoints, and you play Arma, and you just like realistic games like that, this is exactly what you should be looking at. You know, Squad is also a game you should be looking at for large-scale conventional warfare. If you want to look at operator, special forces kind of driven ops, special ops kind of stuff, where you can customize your weapon in a very cool way, a very unique way that hasn't been done in any game ever. Like, seriously, when have you ever seen a game have customization like this? It's friggin' amazing. And has proper mission structures tailored to that, with proper team mission or team rooms with pre-mission briefings and planning. This is where you want to go. This is the game you want. And I sincerely hope when this game hits early access that it sells just as well as Squad did, because Squad is an amazing game, don't get me wrong, but Ground Branch, if I had to choose which game I would like to personally own in the end, if I had to buy one or the other, I would be leaning more towards Ground Branch. Squad is a phenomenal game, do not get me wrong, I absolutely love it. It's a hard decision, really. I mean, you're comparing Squad and Ground Branch, both are like easily my favorite titles as of late. There's nothing that can even compare to those two games right now for me. And if I had to pick one, it would probably be Ground Branch, simply just because of the new mechanics that are introduced in this game that are unique, that have not been done before, and because of the overall plan and design philosophy behind the game. That's what intrigues me, because even Squad has some levels of artificial balancing. They have to do some form of it. They have to do some, like the M4s and the AKs and the way those guns function and operate. They have to do, you know, some artificial balancing to kind of alleviate it. Not a whole lot, because they obviously don't want to, they still want to have an accurate depiction of realistic weapon functions and, you know, how they behave. But at the same time, like, they also need to somewhat balance assets in a way that is going to make gameplay, you know, kind of even. Like, before, people were complaining that the US Army, in the past, you know, people were complaining, okay, the US Army has ACOGs, the insurgents don't, so how is this even fair? It's like, well, what the fuck? You know, insurgents don't actually run around with ACOGs and shit on their rifles most of the time, you know, back then anyway. Like, they can get optics, but most of them don't. Like, come on. This game isn't about balance, this game is about depicting reality, and this is real life. You want to win? You gotta strategize and figure out a way to play to your advantage. And it's not like the insurgents weren't winning, they were winning many, many times. The main tactic for them is to bring the fight to them, get within close proximity, and just use the firepower of an AK to fucking kill them. And that's exactly what you would do, and that's exactly how you would win, because most of the US forces would try to keep their distance. They want to have long-range engagements because their weapons are more accurate, even though the the AK-47 and the AKMs are still pretty accurate in the game. The point is, the Americans had the advantage of optics at the time. Not so much anymore. Now that there is actual optics for the insurgents and the militia and the Russians as well, there's no longer that real balancing issue. But, again, it's kind of like somewhat artificial balancing, even though it is realistic to have optics for conventional forces. So, like, don't get me wrong. I mean, having the Russians and the militia have optics makes perfect sense. But within Ground Branch, they're going, again, with their game design concept, Norg, which is basically just modeling the game after real life. That's it. Just model the game after real life. It actually makes development, I think, slightly easier in some sense, because you don't have to try to tailor the game to appease players or whatever. You know, most players would be like, oh, this gun's too powerful, nerf it, or do something, right? And people would have this huge argument, and developers have to struggle with finding a way to balance it. This makes it easier, because it's like, hey, there is no balance. This is how things work in the real world. You don't like it? Well, fuck you. And I don't mean to be like, you know, super aggressive with that, but it's true, right? You don't like it, then you're playing the wrong game. Because this game is trying to replicate reality. And if you don't like reality, well then, go play Rainbow Six Siege. Haha, right? Like, whatever. Anyway, man, I'm like way too much trying to like knock on that game's door and just talk shit about it. But anyway, the point is, this is shaping up to be a good game. It's fun as hell. I love it. And I wish the developers the utmost highest luck I could possibly give them. I wish I was rich. It's moments like this where I wish I could just walk out my door, buy a lottery ticket, and win like $100 million just so I can give the developers like half of that. You know, just so I could be like, here, take all the money and go fucking crazy and make this game the best game ever. You know, like hire a dev team. You know, do whatever it needs, or, you know, get more people on board. They already have their dev team. I mean, like, hire more help. You know, get more people to develop the game, speed it up, expedite the process, and release a title that we're all going to freaking just jangle your yarbles. Want to dry hump. Getting perverted now because that's how excited I am for this game. It's just it's as simple as that, guys. Like this freaking game. Every time I play it, every single time I play it, you know, I've done the shoot house like a bajillion times. I play the single player every now and again. I'll pop into this game, kind of mess around with it, and just be like, oh, it's so good. The whole game feels amazing. But it's kind of hard to dictate how it actually really feels until you go up against another player. And once you actually go up against another player, that's when you realize just how freaking perfect the design of this game is. Like, seriously, it takes movement to a whole new level, where you're not going to be running and gunning. It's impossible to do that. You're going to die. I've tried it. I was playing this. I would try to be aggressive. I would try to run up and shoot. You get killed, because, hey, that's exactly how that happens in real life. You're an unstable firing platform. Unless you get a lucky shot off and hit him in the head, chances are you're going to die, because that person who's stationary, being calm and collected, is going to put rounds downrange into your face and kill your ass, and it's freaking glorious. Anyway, my name's been PepperBelly. Thank you guys for joining me today on this video. I will be uploading the next gameplay video at some point in the future. I'll see you guys on the next one.